Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Executive Chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. It's a great day here. It's nice and sunny here in Barcelona, the Mobile World Congress. It's a delight to be back to showcase some of the new ideas and new things that Google and many of you are talking about. I thought what we should do is actually start by inviting my very good friend Hugo Berra, who is the director of Android products, to come and give you a little taste of the future of the mobile web, the one that we're so incredibly excited about. Hugo, can you join us? This is Hugo Berra.
Thanks, Eric, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm here today to talk to you about Chrome and Android, two of the most significant engineering investments that Google has made in the life of the company. And the reason why is that we just launched a brand new product that brings together for the first time these two technology worlds. And that product is the Chrome app for Android. And I'm here to give you a quick tour of it. But before I do that, let me just say that we designed Chrome for Android with three goals in mind. We wanted to build, first of all, a mobile browser that was really, really fast. Secondly, a mobile browser that was really clean and really simple. And third, a mobile browser that made it really easy for you to take all of your stuff with you wherever you go by using the cloud.
And by the way, I hope everybody here is using Chrome. Now, if you care about security, you should use Chrome, because it's by far the safest. But if you don't care about that, you care about speed, you should use Chrome because it's the fastest. But if you don't care about security or speed, it's free. Right? So if you're not using Chrome already, this is a pretty good reason. In fact, there's a fourth reason now, isn't it?
There's going to be 5 of them. Let me show you my 5 favorite features on Chrome for Android. So if we can switch over to the device, what I have here is Chrome running on a Galaxy Nexus. So here it is. And I'm going to start by visiting Google News. So that's news.google.com. And you can see right away here, with just one letter, Google is already suggesting to me websites and a few search queries based on what it knows. And how long do you think it'll take for the page to load when I click on the top suggestion here? 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds? It is a pretty long page. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that top link now. There you go. Virtually zero load time. Basically, what's happening here is when Chrome is pretty sure about the page that I'm going to navigate to next, it actually starts preloading the site, so that by the time I'm done typing the URL or click on that top suggestion, it's already there waiting for me. Right? We build smarts into the browser to make the experience much faster. This stuff is turned on by default for Wi-Fi, but you can also turn it on for cellular data if you want.
And a lot of people talk about mobile phone platforms. This is an example where Android beats everybody because it's a real operating system with extraordinary underlying performance, which enables this kind of pre-caching.
There you go. Let me show you another cool feature that I really like, if we could go back to the device. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to navigate to ESPN. In fact, I'm going to do that on a new tab. So I'll start typing here, and again, it's giving me a few suggestions. Instead of going to the ESPN mobile site, which is really awesome, I'm going to go to the classic site, which is the one that I like the most. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And so as the page loads here, you'll see that it's a pretty rich website. It has a lot of links in it. With the big fingers that we all have, it's sometimes hard to precisely click on a link like this. So if you see there's some links here on the bottom, for example, that are quite small, you can read them, but they're hard to click on. So what we've done is we've built a feature called Link Preview. And what it does is when I click on a cluster of links like that one, it pops up a little window, and it makes it much easier for me to choose exactly that page that I want to go to. So I want to go to tennis. And there it is. Next, let me show you how easy it is to navigate between tabs on Chrome. What you do is, in fact, there's a few ways, but one of them is you just gently swipe from the outside of the screen. It's actually the other way. and it goes back to the previous tab that I was in. Of course, I could do the same thing again if I had more pages, or I can go back. Right? So it's a pretty easy way to travel between tabs. And speaking of tabs, most of the mobile browsers out there impose a hard restriction on how many open tabs you can have at most on your browsing experience. In fact, even the original Android browser has a limit. Chrome for Android doesn't. You can have as many pages, as many sites open as you want. And still talking about tabs, we're going to go back to the device. I'm going to show you another way to access and manage your tabs on Chrome for Android. So I'll click on this little icon up here. And now watch how swift and beautiful it is to just play with these tabs. It's like I have a deck of cards in my hand and I'm just flipping through them. And in fact, I can even pull a little card out with a swipe gesture, or I can put it back, pull another card out to look at that page. So it's all beautiful. And if I want to get rid of one of these tabs, I can just swipe it away like that. It's incredibly fluid, and boy, this is pretty satisfying to do as well. It's like I want to do this all day. So there you go. What do you think, Eric, so far?
I think what you're seeing is people. People have talked a lot about in ICS, Ice Cream Sandwich. We got the UI right. We got it right for a global audience, and we got it in a way that's particularly coherent. You see the UI benefits when you marry the Chrome capabilities on top of that UI, and you're seeing it now.
Great. So I want to show you one last feature of Chrome for Android. I want to show you how we've actually enabled you to take, as I said earlier, basically your entire Chrome experience with you wherever you go by taking advantage of the cloud. So I'm now going to go to my computer, actually, for just a little bit, if we can switch over to that. So I've got a bunch of tabs here open. I've got some soccer, some tennis, some important celebrity news, some science articles that I've been reading and want to save for later, some technology, some restaurant stuff. And in fact, I actually wanted to look up the restaurant that we're going to go to as a team later today so that I have the details. So that's the name of the restaurant. And it looks like I can actually just click on the page for the restaurant here. So I've got all the details, the address, and so on. And what Chrome for Android does is it makes it really easy for me to take all this stuff with me without even thinking about it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to close my laptop. In fact, I could even shut down. So there you go. And we're going to go back to the device. And what I'll do here is I'll go into the menu. I'll click on Other Devices. And what you see here are all of my devices. In fact, I'll just give it a little refresh. And there you go. You just saw it showing up at the bottom here. This is the page that I was actually looking at on my laptop a few seconds ago. So I'll tap on that. And here it's loading the page. It's exactly the same page that you saw earlier. Now, what's really cool is watch what happens when I click on the browser back button from this page. So I'm going to tap on that now. So it's taking me back to the search results that I was just looking at on my computer. So it's not only syncing, thank you. Yeah. Not only is it syncing all of my open tabs, it's also syncing the navigation stack for all of these tabs. And before you ask me anything, Eric, you can turn this off completely if for some reason you don't feel comfortable with that functionality.
Okay.
I know you love privacy, so
perfect.
That's the rationale. So that's Chrome for Android. This is available in beta today from Android Market for all ice cream sandwich phones and tablets. In fact, we just published this app to 20 new countries, so it's available in a lot of places right now. And I want to close by saying this product was the work of two large teams working together for the first time. They're represented here by several folks. So I want to say thank you to the Chrome folks, and thank you to the Android folks for helping us build this.
And thank you to Hugo for giving us a demo. Thank you. Okay. In addition to talking about where we are in technology a little bit, what I really wanted to do is talk a little bit about the state of the world and the world that we all operate in. because I think getting this right, the stakes are huge. So we often talk about how today everybody has a smartphone, but actually just 1 billion people in the world have smartphones. There's hundreds of millions of people who've never played Angry Birds, they've never downloaded an app, they've never used GPS to find their way home, and definitely never the Android versus iPhone argument, which I love so much. So last year, the population of the world reached a record 7 billion, but the number of online people, it's only about 2. So the World Wide Web has yet to live up to its name in that sense. For every person online, there are 2 that are not. They've never done a Google search. They've never watched a YouTube video. They've never experienced the cloud except, perhaps when it rains. So when we talk about the power of technology, we need to be realists. For most people, the digital divide, the sort of digital revolution has not arrived yet. But being a realist does not mean being a defeatist. Every revolution begins with a small group of people, sort of like us. So think how amazing the web is today with just 2 billion people, less than a third of humanity. Imagine how much better it would be with another 5 billion people online. More innovation, more creativity, more opportunity. The past decade has taught us that if you connect people with information, they will change the world. I'm very proud of this. The problem that technology is that as technology develops, another kind of digital divide will emerge, and that's what I want to talk about today. So let's talk about a first future, a future for the privileged few. I think that people will experience the future in different ways. The first future belongs to the ultra-connected people, pretty much us in the room, the early adopters, computer scientists, developers, the startup founders, people who work for organizations with the will and the resources to embrace the cutting edge of technology. And that tends to be the lucky few, an underrepresented minority who mostly start with huge advantages in life, a good education, economic prosperity, democratic government, and a lucky birth. For this group, the future offers only the limits of what science can deliver and society deems ethical. And that will be a huge leap forward with technology augmenting our lives in every way. Now, we know that Moore's law, which says that computing power roughly doubles every 2 years, still holds true. And we know that the cost of computer storage per gigabyte is halving every 14 months. So we can look forward to a future of essentially unlimited speed and unlimited processing power. So the cost of microchips and hard drives will fall to less than $1 a piece. Tiny, powerful sensors will be embedded in everything, from clothes to furniture. A new intelligent infrastructure will emerge, we would argue heavily powered by Android. And by 2020, fiber networks will be deployed in almost every city, delivering peak speeds of 1 gigabit per second and 300 megabits per second sustained. This is something that Google is already working on, making happen in Kansas City, Kansas, where we're building a super fast fiber network, as everybody knows. If you go to Korea and Japan, where those networks have already been built, you can see it. It's really life-changing. So we're beginning to see science fiction become a reality thanks to these changes. Think back to Star Trek, or my favorite, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Much of what writers imagined is possible. Translation, voice recognition, ebooks, all routinely in use today. Think about Google Maps. Now, these were the stuff of science fictions until very recently, and yet these things all happened faster than even scientists predicted. And while we overestimate short-term technological change, we tend to massively underestimate the more seismic shifts that take place long-term. So people who predict that holograms and virtual reality and self-driving cars will be commonplace quite soon are absolutely right. And these technological advances will redefine the way we live, the way we interact with each other. So think about the choices that you're so often forced, if you will, to make in life. You need to go to a conference across the world for work, and at the same time your favorite artist is playing live. Well, in the future, you'll be able to dispatch a robot, for example, to each venue, allowing you to experience both events. A little robot, by the way, they can pack them in, using a 3D screen and a control system. Or you can stay in your office at home, stand back and observe what both robots are experiencing simultaneously, or step in and control your robotic presence appropriately. So the next day, you won't be flying back across the Atlantic, so you'll be able to make your daughter's soccer game after all. Or think about the terrible road accidents, something much more serious than what I was just talking about, that you see in the press, or the traffic jams that you get caught up in all the time. Nearly 370,000 people lost their lives on U.S. roads in the last 8 years. 93% of them due to human error. Using technology to improve safety on roads and cut congestions will improve all of us. Think about the number of lives saved by this kind of stuff. And driverless cars are a lot closer than you think. Google's cars, which I think people have heard about, have already driven over 200,000 miles, and other companies and research institutions are doing groundbreaking research, thinking about this and trying to make this stuff happen. And in America, states like Nevada, Florida, and California are now making the law possible for these things to actually end up on the roads, and they will be safer. That's the important point. But the progress that we'll experience won't be just as individuals. You'll see really smart things happening that will improve the way our societies operate. Now, the trend of big data, and everybody understands this is a core trend of computer science, this trend of big data in computing will allow society to get much better insight into how people and communities function. Governments will be better able to spot economic indicators, right? Maybe they'll even see a crisis faster than the last one that they created, right? Doctors will be able to accurately predict the outbreak of disease. Teachers will get a better understanding of what works best for kids. And transparency will transform the way governments operate, forcing bureaucrats and politicians to be more open in their decision making. So there's an emerging global group of global citizens, inspired by people like Steve Jobs, who believe society can be shifted by these platforms, that the way we organize ourselves can make a difference. That these passions, that the people are so passionate that it borders on the religious. But the important and the ultimate achievement in this vision of the future is that technology actually disappears. Now, I don't mean technology becomes less relevant. I mean it becomes part of everyday life. The people will have to spend less time getting technology to work, right? The years of debugging your PC long gone. Instead of worrying about which cable or which computers or where your content is stored, because it's all so seamless. It will just be there. The web will be everything, but it will also be nothing. It will be like electricity, just always there. So as a result, people will instinctively trust in technology and have a greater faith in the technology that's part of their lives than in any other institution, and the future is indeed a very bright place. Now let's consider another group of people. Just below the group I'm describing is another group. It's a much larger group, but it's also technologically advanced. Well, I'm going to call them the connected contributors. Now, this is a generation who grew up with increasingly sophisticated technology as part of their daily lives, born into households connected into broadband with multiple computers, equipped with skills and digital literacy to use them, but they're also members of the middle class. But this new technology will still open the world, new worlds for all of these connected contributors. The holopresence, for example, right? You don't have to have all the expense that I was highlighting in the first group. People will be able to rent or borrow a mobile device for a specific location. They can use a holographic projector to project their appearance, captured in real time from their own mobile device while watching a live video from the remote location. Imagine being able to stand among the street performers in the Grand Market of Marrakesh, in the heart of the Congo during a total eclipse, or in North Korea whenever the regime has its first real election. These will be sort of amazing moments to participate in, and you'll be able to do it. The cloud will be equally transformative, obviously, and we talked a lot about this, for small businesses. All of the chores of enterprises, payroll, inventory management, supplier relationships, and so on, will easily be handled by the cloud, where existing servers can provide powerful, low-cost applications for all, and everyone agrees with this now. So if you have, for example, a good idea for a clothing line, you'll be able to leverage cloud applications to design outfits, contract with factories, establish a digital storefront, lease a physical space, take delivery, and open for business all within 24, 48 hours. And if successful, you'll be able to scale your business faster than ever before. Lowest barrier to entry, huge scale opportunity. Why does this matter? Or is this just some novelty? Because apps and services like these are improving the experiences of the growing middle class. There's this global middle class that's coming in as a result of globalization, et cetera, and they're going to play a decisive role in changing society. Now, not everybody's alike. There'll be a divide between, for example, those who build and those who buy. Those who build will harness entrepreneurial energies in new tools and forms of expression. In this century, computer science, I'm very proud of this, is much more than just the science of computers. Coding is more than just writing programs. Tools like Speak to Tweet or Ushahidi, quickly designed to deal with extreme circumstances And crises are perfect examples. By combining passion and talent, developers have created tools which were used by dissidents and activists all over the world to overcome government restrictions, and barriers to freedom. Now, developers are the engineers of human freedom in that sense, that talented people all over the world will create the change that we need. So at the extreme, these builders blur into the privileged few, keeping the dream of upward mobility alive and well. Now, of the larger group that I'm calling out in this case, those who buy will be more reactive. They're going to navigate the world by information through intuition rather than by specific understandings. They're going to not create new tools. They'll just tend to purchase the creations of others. However, those who buy will be sophisticated consumers, the 90% that engages, responds, and collaboratively filters the content produced by the 10%. Economically, those who buy will work for businesses and governments and nonprofits, and they'll sustain the key institutions of every society. Being most invested in the common spaces of the web, they'll speak with a loud voice and defend those common spaces from attacks on freedom of expression and basic human rights. Now, I've always believed this. I've always believed that the web is more than a network of machines. It's a network of minds that's evolving into a collective intelligence and a global conscious. You look at this. Look at this. Every day you see it. It's extraordinary. Look at the way people came together last year to help the victims of the Japanese earthquake. This terrible thing that happened to these guys. We see this in moment of crisis and tragedy and joy, and it is the web that unites us in sentiment and action. There's another group that I want to talk about. I'm going to call them the aspiring majority. And although the connected computers that I've identified earlier are a rapidly growing community, they're still a minority. There is another future that awaits for the next 5 billion. For many people, the web is still a scarce resource. And we always forget about these people. We assume that everybody's like us, but they're still bandwidth challenged. In the communities all over the world, there will be only pockets of connectivity, digital oases, if you will, in online deserts. And most have no connectivity at all. They don't have local data centers or even copper wires in the ground. These are people who live in the most remote regions and the poorest regions of the world, and the internet has yet to arrive for them in any meaningful way. Over the next decade, there are going to be many, many improvements to the digital infrastructure of their developing world. Wired networks will get faster and go farther and so forth. In coming years, the number of new data centers, for example, in markets like Southeast Asia, Turkey, and China will boom, and more communities will have stable, direct access to the internet. Fiber optic connections will obviously be widespread. We all know this. As the general infrastructure improvements lead to falling installation cost, fiber gets faster and cheaper, and WDM technology, everybody here has heard about this, allow existing fiber optic cables to carry more data without upgrades to the backbone infrastructure that's already in place. For certain, this still is not going to be sufficient to give everybody the same online experience, and there's a limit to the amount of new infrastructure that will be laid, if you will, by 2020. In some parts of the world, it will be impractical to serve communities with large-scale fixed-line web connections. But this is not the only way to get people connected. We cannot, it's important to say, we cannot simply imagine the future by extrapolating from the past. As data access arrives at scale among these aspiring majority, they're skipping dial-up modems. Remember those? I really love those. DSL lines, right? Broadband, they're going straight to high-speed wireless connections for mobile phones using standards like 4G, which is, of course, the big theme of this conference. So the smartphone revolution will be universal, and a mobile experience that, at least at the level of today, will be available to pretty much anybody at a fraction of the price. Now, in 12 years, doing the math, Moore's Law, handsets 20 times or more faster, phones that cost $400 will cost $20. If Google gets it right, there'll be an Android in literally every pocket. At the current growth rate, it's certainly possible. Let's hope so. And for people living on $1 a day, that's still a big investment, but it will be strategic because mobile will change lives. So imagine in the future when every handset could become preloaded. I'll give you an example to make this point. Preloaded with a basic medical diagnostic tool that helps you diagnose with the picture and sounds ailments you might have. Take a picture. Phone has a camera. So phones could automatically search nearby medical facilities to determine, where appropriate medications are available, refer you to the local doctor, or remind you when you're due for another dose or that sort of thing. If necessary, the application can refer you to a specialist, automatically sending information about you and so on. We know that even nomadic peoples are willing to invest in technologies that make a big difference in their daily lives. Things like satellite dishes and television. So we absolutely know that this will be true for smartphones. Now, it's important to say, smartphones are part of the solution, but having a smartphone is not enough to get you online. You still need a data connection, after all. You know, a smartphone without a data connection is sort of lonely. But smartphones don't have to talk to a central hub. Again, this is our model is somehow that they're always connected to these brilliant internet 4G connections, but they don't have to be. They can just talk to each other, sharing data in some sort of a peer-to-peer relationship without an intermediary. These are generally known as mesh networks. A network where the mesh is the constituent parts and things are forwarded among the mesh nodes. Mesh networks don't even have to be connected to the internet to be useful. Instead of connecting everyone to a centralized web infrastructure, communities could simply beam local data from machine to machine to share local content. In fact, Android, you can beam from handset to handset without a cord using Bluetooth and other technologies. They can also be connected, obviously, by the web by an internet-enabled server. So mesh networks you could build, for example, using Wi-Fi or even over 4G. So why do I talk about mesh? Well, mesh is a simpler option. It's a stepping stone for getting communities connected. And if we ignore this, we ignore the reality of all of these people who are just trying to get a basic level of connectivity. So this is the most decentralized form of digital infrastructure possible, and by far the cheapest to deploy. So anybody with a solar collector can have a server and build a local network, and you can charge the smartphones with the necessary solar equipment. So even when the data connections are unreliable, text messaging and interactive IVR basically are the last line of defense. There are 5.9 billion mobile subscribers. There are more than 600 million in Africa. China, nearly 1 billion. 2/3 of these devices are feature phones, not smartphones. And some people are still going to be using them at the end of the decade. Now, no one is suggesting that technology will suddenly transform the social, political, and economic conditions of communities. But connectivity, even modest amounts, certainly changes lives. It enables people to become more resourceful. Anyone, anywhere will be able to run a business, a school, a news outlet from home, wherever it might be. If an Angolan teenager has created a compelling piece of music, he might want to hire an American to help arrange the viral marketing and arranging virtual performances. That's what's so interesting about this. It works both ways. It works for them too. So in this sense, the network becomes, think of it as a digital watering hole where people meet and hang out. Communities are drawn closer together. People live in communities everywhere in the world. So people can access the network, can engage in these shared experiences, but regardless of these physical obstacles that we're all familiar with. So a single internet-related hub can directly share internet access with a whole community. Every person won't have direct access at all times, but every community will. So even then, we get there. In every village, there will be an internet cafe or a lean-to, which obviously acts as a center for people to connect to each other in the world. But perhaps most importantly, it will redefine the relationship that these people have with the world. In times of war and suffering, it will be impossible to ignore the voices that cry out for help. Just think about the extraordinary pictures that we're seeing, that literally are coming out of Syria every day. Assad's brutality on display for everyone to see. Right? The world is upset, the world is mobilizing, people care. In this new world, there will be far fewer places for dictators, people who brutalize other people, to hide. It will be far easier for communities to mobilize themselves against autocratic regime. By the way, this is what we saw in the Arab Spring. So in a world where everybody's knowledge becomes everyone else's, education, science, and discovery are shared and enjoyed by people everywhere. And the appeal of doing business, developing countries, and ever greater, and corporations like Google, but many others represented here, will work to win billions of new customers. So with information comes power, and with power comes choice, and smarter, resourceful citizens are going to demand a better deal for their communities with more ethical and responsible behavior from the global elites. So to me, this is the final lesson of this future. There will still be elites. We're not going to have a monopoly on progress of opportunity. Technology is a leveler. The weak will be made strong, and those with nothing shall have something. So I wanted to put this into perspective by saying this, of course, is why I do what I do. I suspect this is why many of you do what you do. In many ways, we will all become more equal, but what is interesting is the ways in which our differences will persist. They're expressed in new forms for the next 2 decades with profound consequences for our economies, our cultures, and our understanding of the world. In many ways, the gap between the top and the bottom will be larger, not smaller, because of the outcome, the technology that I'm describing. But this is not least, certainly a contributing factor, is because some governments are going to try to control and restrict access to the web and to new technology. Example. 40 countries engage in some form of online censorship, up just from 4 a decade ago. Google's products, something we obviously care a lot about, are blocked in about 25 of the 125 countries in which we operate. And even in the US, we've seen worrying legislative and regulatory proposals in recent months. We will see more of these efforts, but I think they're going to fail. And I think they're going to fail because the internet and technology are like water. They'll find a way through. No system of censorship can be absolute. There will always be chinks which clever, artful citizens can use to find information, organize, and break free. But we need to act now to avoid the rise of this sort of new digital caste system that I'm talking about. We're not all born into families with laptops and robots and all the other fun things that we love to speculate about. But everyone, every human being is blessed with creativity, imagination, and the capacity for innovation, regardless of where we come from. I believe this profoundly. In every person, there is company. There's an even better company waiting to get out. Technology empowers by its very nature and by ensuring universal access to the cloud, to each other, to the world, we can create a global community of equals. Every revolution, I started by saying, this is a revolution that we started, right? I'm very, very proud to be with my tribe, if you will. All of you who care about the same things that I do, that we do, speaking for Google. All of us here have been given the opportunities and the talent and the passion to change the world through the power of this technology. Let us resolve as developers and entrepreneurs to commit ourselves to building a world where everyone has a chance to be connected and to enjoy a future of greater freedom and opportunity for all. So let's have a wonderful time here this week, and let's all get to work. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we have mics and we have questions on the things I've said, or anything else is fine. This gentleman would like to ask the first question. Go ahead. We'll get started.
Okay. Motorola has never pursued Chinese companies over IP infringements, not wanting to lose market share in China. Now you own that IP. Will you pursue that infringement?
You're asking a question about Motorola patents and Chinese infringement of that?
Yeah, so lots of Chinese companies infringe Motorola IP, and Motorola's never been brave enough to tackle that in Chinese courts.
Well, Google's been willing to take on China pretty well, so it's probably too early to know exactly. We haven't closed yet, so the two companies are operating separately. But we've taken a pretty strong position in favor of intellectual property, operating under the rule of law, and against censorship. So again, without answering your question, let me say that I'm well aware of the issues, and we're certainly considering your question, and we'll know once the acquisition completes. Some more questions. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Arno Kral from the German online magazine Tom's Networking Guide. I have one question concerning payment. If it comes to real democracy, payment has to be peer-to-peer only, without intermediate. And I would like to offer you a technology developed in the University of Kiel called Fair Cash. If you're interested in it, I would like to send you a note.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you familiar with Bitcoin? Yeah. Bitcoin is nuts? Okay. So, first place, thank you. We're always interested in new technology. There are some issues with peer-to-peer money. It turns out that it's, in most cases, illegal. Aside from that, it's a great idea. And the reason that it's illegal is that governments don't trust it because of the issues of money laundering and so forth, and the central banks want to control it. So whenever we've looked at, we had various proposals, the Googlers know this very well, we had various proposals to have our own currency, which we were going to call Google Bucks, by the way. But we ultimately decided that we did not want to sort of get into that because of these issues. I suspect that most of these pure peer-to-peer systems will have to have a pretty significant regulatory role for the reasons that I said. And I think perhaps that's something you've solved, but that's in fact the challenge of peer-to-peer money. It's actually a regulatory and trafficking kind of an issue. More questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, you're talking about the internet almost as a human right. From that perspective, how supportive are you of the idea of having the internet controlled by international organizations, such as the United Nations, for example?
There's a lot of concern among the internet community about the transfer of control of the internet to the ITU. The ITU is a magnificent organization that's done a great job in telecommunications, in managing sort of the interoperability. The principles of the way the internet has worked are different from those of the ITU. So if the real question you're asking is, how do I feel about moving into the ITU? My question would be, what's broken? Right? If the current governance is working pretty well, which I would argue that it is, then I wouldn't move it. Or if I moved it, I would move it very, very carefully. There's a lot of concern in the internet community that a movement of the internet governance, and in particular control over naming, DNS, all that kind of stuff, into an organization like the ITU would further balkanize the internet by allowing it to be broken into pieces which are regulated in different ways. That would be a disaster. It may seem interesting to a local business because they might get some competitive advantage, but the core thing that the internet has done is it has flattened access. It has given access to so many different people. So in the sum, the openness and interoperability that's possible on the internet is one of the greatest achievements of mankind in our lifetime. Do not give that up easily. You will regret it. You will hate it. Because all of a sudden, all that freedom, all that flexibility, you'll find it chipped away for one good reason after another. I cannot be more emphatic. Be very, very careful about moves which seem logical, but have the effect of balkanizing the internet. Question over there. Yes, sir.
I'm from the part of the world that has the other 5 billion people who don't have access to the internet. What's Google doing right now with regards to technology?
Which country are you from?
Nigeria.
Good. So let's use Nigeria as an example. Nigeria is an important country, lots and lots of economic growth, difficult to get to. There's a fiber optic cable that comes down from Portugal that goes along in the, I guess it'd be the Atlantic Ocean, and comes into, I think, Lagos. And then from there, you have satellite links around the towns, or in some cases, microwave links. So when we look at that, we say, what's the biggest problem? It's the cost of internet access. The cost of internet access in a country like Nigeria is 10 times, 20 times, 50 times what it is here, in a country which is far more poor, right? That's completely unfair. So there's a number of things that we can do. Obviously, we can improve the connectivity, help fund access. We can also put in proxy caches, which again give a local speed up and take bandwidth off of the expensive satellites and keep the content local. So the general strategy for a country like Nigeria, which has worked in many other African countries, is start with the access question. My personal opinion about Nigeria is that if you get the access right, the citizens, who are very clever, very creative, they'll get everything else done. They'll build the websites. They'll get the content. They're smart, and they're waiting for it. But it's so expensive for them. And a lot of people have looked at this. It's the last sort of 10 miles of access. It's horrendous. And that's the problem to be worked on, and that's where we're funding that's what we're funding. Let's see. Can we do over here? There's a
yes, hello. I'm from the Netherlands. What's your reaction on the Facebook announcement from yesterday regarding the mobile web?
Well, first place, I think there's a set of companies that are doing really interesting work. I think Facebook is certainly one of them. Facebook Zero is extremely popular in the developing world, and it's to their credit that they've done a very good job. anything that gets people more connected and more online is good. Anything that excludes people is bad. It's easy to understand. Is it the question next? Do you want to go ahead? Sorry. Who wants to go next? In the back over there? Yes.
When are we going to see Android on feature phones?
On feature phones? Why don't you just buy a smartphone? Okay, so a better question is, when will smartphones cost what feature phones cost? And the answer is next year, right? Because of Moore's Law, right? So if you think about last year's $400 Android phone is next year's $100 phone, roughly speaking. So I think it's one of those things where it's hard to take. There are people working on it, but you need a phone with a basic screen and a basic browser that can run the kind of computation to do the things I'm talking about. And it's happening. We have many, many partners, many of whom are here at the show, who are working on phones that will be in the $100 to $150 range. Their eventual goal is to get it to $70 range. If you look at the partitioning in feature phones, when you get to the $70 point, all of a sudden there's a huge new market. And in many cases, especially in poorest areas, the phones are ultimately resold in the $20 and $30 range. So this is achievable within the next couple of years. That's why this message of globalization is so important. Let's see, let's some more questions. Let's go over here somewhere.
You mentioned the growth of legislation that was worrying you.
Yes, there's a lot.
There is. What message would you have for regulators who clearly want to regulate?
Well, that's their job. They're regulators. They have to regulate. They don't have. They're not deregulators.
Absolutely. So, if in their minds they're attempting to balance a right to freedom of information and also a right for privacy, what message would you have for them about how they need to change the way they think?
Okay, so each of these is a complicated answer, but the first answer, which is, I think, most important, is that there's a tendency of regulators to regulate what's happening now as opposed to what will be. So the first thing is, if you have to regulate, try to regulate an outcome, not the technology. In other words, if there's an outcome you don't like, don't specify in law a specific technical solution because the technology moves forward. There are so many new technologies to help protect privacy, for example, that are in development and so forth, that you would hope that the privacy regulator would never restrict that. I would also hope that the market would help here. We, for example, have lots and lots of things that we care about privacy. We give you the tools, for example, to see what we know about you. We give you the tools to delete what we know about you, at least within the Google system. You have control over that. So again, the core thing on privacy is to represent that if you're going to regulate it in such a way that you're regulating an outcome which allows the technology to get better rather than to hold it back. The unintended cost of regulation is often the loss of innovation in these markets. So there are many, many other examples. If you look in Europe, there's a strong commitment to privacy, which I actually personally agree with a great deal. If you look at some of the more recent initiatives, they're well-intentioned, but they're hard to define. So again, a period of public comment and trying to understand what is implementable would be helpful. And the final thing is, don't resort to sound bites about these things. There is a winner and a loser in these sort of regulatory battles. And so one man's X is another man's inverse of X. And you want to be very careful that you frame that correctly so people understand what they're losing as well as what they're gaining. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Diego from Static Android at Block here in Spain, and I was thinking about the optic fiber you're telling Kansas. What will be the benefits of that in the privacy of the net?
I think people will want to move to Kansas City, Kansas.
Me too.
You too, okay. Well, at the speeds of networks that we're building, the distinctions between television, radio, DVDs, high-definition DVD, they all go away. It's just bits. That's a huge change in economics. So all of a sudden, everything you purchase comes in on one fiber optic connection directly to your home, and then you can choose from it, and you can obviously pay for this package or that package. so much of the media, the infrastructure that we all have grown up with was there because of technical limitations, which fiber simply eliminates. Now, the obvious next question is, what are the killer apps that are going to be developed? Well, we have no idea. But what we do know is that every time bandwidth improves, everything just gets faster, right? The browsers get faster, the games get faster, the 3D gets faster. A gigabit internet connection that's really a gigabit, sustained half a gigabit, allows pure 3D. Well, ours should generate between 300 and 500 megabits sustained. With that, you can do true holographic images, and you can imagine the gaming opportunities and other applications that will be created by that. Go get some more questions. Yes. Go ahead. At the way back.
Thank you. You talked about information brings power, and power brings control, and I think also a little bit, well, you said freedom of choice, but I think it also brings a little bit of control. You also said that software can shape the freedom of humanity. Don't you think that both two together in hands of only one company could be dangerous?
What is the name of that company?
I don't know. You know one?
I don't think there's any evidence that that's going to happen. Let me say right up front that I believe that the decisions that are being made by technology companies are in fact quite consequential to this debate. So the fact that these systems, for example, tend to remember things, that's a specific design decision. The fact that the information can be, that it's hard to block them has implications for the Arab Spring. So there's lots and lots of technical decisions which in fact have a political, they don't have a political goal, but they have a political outcome. And they tend to have a pro-democracy, pro-communication, pro-freedom of expression bias. It's one of the best exports out of our industry is that these decisions which involve how information is used tend to promote, I think, the kind of open system that I'm promoting. The two occur, they're correlated, although they're not necessarily caused by one another. Over there? Yes.
Excuse me. I'm from Iran, one of those 20 countries that you mentioned.
Yes.
Gmail is sometimes blocked by the government, but do you know that Android market and downloading the Chrome browser is blocked by Google itself on Iranian people? And probably...
is that true?
Yeah.
That's
Can
true.
you take any step to remove those limitations?
I have to ask the lawyer in the room.
Okay, but...
This is due to the sanctions? So the answer is no. I'm sorry. Because it's a U.S. law issue. Go ahead. No. Did you have any other more comments?
No. Just I wonder if you're willing to take any steps, or probably
We can't violate U.S. law.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, no, I mean I'm with you, but prison is like there's no bandwidth. So go ahead. Over there. Way over the end. Go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Schmidt. My name is Magnus. Thank you for an enjoyable presentation. I've got two questions. The first one is related to the disruption of global communications by solar events. There was a big one in 1921, one in 1980 when Quebec's power grid went down, and they say that something will happen again at the end of this year.
I'm sorry, the disruption due to?
Solar activity, solar flares.
You mean solar flares, yes.
Exactly. They call it geothermal or geomagnetic
Yes, I'm familiar with this.
And the IEEE published an article recently about the probability of something happening at the end of this year and how it will affect the globe, if you like. Everything is so connected. That's question number one. Question number two is just your take on energy.
Okay, so let's talk about let's do the first one.
Okay.
All of the analysis that I've seen says that there is a series of solar flare cycles, that there is equipment that is sensitive to this, and that the stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis is not. So I'm not worried about it at the moment. Your next question.
Second question is about those things that are sensitive to it, electricity provision, but it's more about the resources available to generate the type of electricity which we will be consuming as we're connecting this next 5 billion people. Not to say we shouldn't, but just your question or your view on electricity availability or power generation in the future.
Well, I obviously believe that the correct way to build out energy infrastructure is to build it with renewable energy. As you know, Europeans are leaders here, in particular Germany, with a place which has not that much sun, is one of the world's leaders in the use of solar, for example. There's lots of reasons to use renewable, including the fact that the installed cost is much, much lower. And if you look at the externalities of burning coal, for example, the external cost in terms of deaths and pollution and so forth are enormous. And the reason they're not priced into the product correctly, in my view, therefore the overall system wastes. It'd be better to have it priced properly in some form of a cost structure that does that. There are many experiments here in Europe of how to do that. I think the reality is that we're going to be dependent upon fossil fuels for a pretty long time. And if we're going to do that, let's do it in a smart way. Let's do it, for example, with a natural gas turbine and a renewable source as well, so that we can balance the two issues. Let's also make sure that when you're building a grid, you build a grid that's much more flexible so that unused energy can be fed back into the system, so-called feed-in tariffs and things like that. So I think you can architect. We know roughly what the technology looks like to build a modern power distribution grid when you're building a new one or when you're replacing the existing one. And one of the things that's missed by all of this debate is that over the next 2 to 3 decades, everything you see in power generation gets replaced. So we're going to replace them anyway. We might as well replace them in the as-built infrastructure with much better technology that's much more along the lines of what I was describing. Okay, over here, one more. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm a journalist for ZD in Belgium. You talked about connecting the other 5 billion. Isn't it the same story as with a phone line or with basic electricity? By the time that these people will get their 1 megabit connection, that the world has evolved so much, economics have fundamentally changed, that they will still be behind. Won't the gap still exist?
This, of course, is what I said in my talk, so I agree with you. That if you, in fact, to some degree, the gap gets larger, because while everybody else is incredibly excited with an ISDN 64K times 2 or 256K or GPRS connection at a megabit, right? So for them, it's life-changing. The connected, privileged few, sort of all of us, are busy with a fiber gigabit and so forth. So in fact, on a percentage basis, the gap is greater. But it does not negate the importance of getting them connected now. Because if you are in a subsistence village in one of these poorer countries, the arrival of that kind of information is life-changing. The arrival of textbooks, for example, where you can learn to read. There are experiments now that are fantastic where people are putting in tablets and low-cost computers which have learn-to-read software in villages that are full of people who are illiterate. And we believe, all of us believe, that people are so ingenious they'll learn how to read this way. They'll get themselves connected. So if you take my position of the world, which is that the average person is incredibly creative with respect to what they're given, let's give them what we can as fast as we possibly can and get them there. If the gap persists, at least everyone will have the benefit of the kind of global knowledge that we all have today. Go ahead.
Hi, Flori Brazel from Brazel Media in Los Angeles. You have spoken many times throughout the keynote this afternoon about technology being life-changing. And part of it you talked about being able to be in 2 places at one time and being able to experience something. And I wonder how you are defining experience, because I think that, how would you define experience?
I'm not sure what you're really getting at. I think to give you an example, in the next decade, it will be possible not only to have holographic images, but obviously incredible sound, and also devices that give you tactile feeling. So that literally, think of it as you put your hands in a set of gloves, you can hear, you can feel, it feels like you're at the rock concert, right? And that stuff is in development now.
But it feels like you're at the rock concert is not the same thing as being. at the rock concert.
Well, you can also like turn the volume down if it gets too loud. I mean, there's all sorts of benefits of my approach.
I'm just wondering, what the world will be turning into, and this is, community building, and the benefits of what you're talking about are very clear, and I don't dispute them. But there are also some semantics, and you said technology will advance as far as society deems it to be ethical. We're talking about major changes.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to hear you more talk about this.
One of the things that I want to sort of emphasize is that there was this meme 10 years ago that it was called bowling alone, that societies had become more isolated. It's completely false. Right? If you look at people today, they're highly, highly interconnected. Last year I gave this quote that the average teenager does 100 texts per day, which I found rather disturbing, but this is what teenagers do. I guess they're in college now, still doing the same thing. I mean, the level of interconnectivity of people has never been higher. And so that it's clear to me that technology is not going to isolate us. It's going to allow us to have even more experiences and do them in parallel, and we get to choose. Isn't it great to be alive? You can choose to go to the concert or not. Right? That's the important thing. Right? It's your choice, and we're making it easier. And by the way, these devices have an off button. It's a shock. You can turn your phone off if it's bothering you. Now, in my case, I think you should always have your Android phones on, okay? But my point is, it has an off button. It's here on the right. So again, if it gets to be, sorry, Andy. We have the founder of Android here. But my point is, it's all about your control, right? So if you don't like my vision of a rock concert, or you don't like rock concerts at all, the great thing is I'm not forcing you to go, right? Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, in the way back? Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Vasil Sovtsar. My question is about Google biology. Search is in your DNA, as well as advertisement. I like the future described by you, and there was no advertisement in that future. Was it intentional, or we will really have such future? So could you please comment this? Search and advertisement and our future.
Well, I was actually trying to not do a Google advertisement during this day, but since you've given me an opportunity to do so, thank you very much. Let's talk about search. Search over the next few years becomes even more accurate, even more personal. This is all with your permission. So assuming that you've opted in and you've signed in and so forth, we can provide even more and better answers. We're also moving from the 10 links structure to actually, if we can, computing the best answer for you. And the judge we use there is whether you find the answer we compute more pleasing or not, and we test that. So we are investing thousands of engineers in essentially artificial intelligence technology to take what is essentially a large collection of data and some things that you tell us, again, with your permission, and then we put those searches together to really give you this sort of amazing wow experience in search. That's, of course, the core mission of the company. That's not changing. With respect to advertising, we love advertising. Advertising is, last time I checked, 97 or 98%. I'm not CEO anymore, so I don't need to know the exact number. It's close to 100% of our revenue, and it's a big, big number at Google for obvious reasons. And we are improving our advertising targeting so that you're much more likely to get an accurate display ad as well as text ad. And we're also exploring other ad formats. The most exciting thing going on right now is in the mobile ad space and the mobile area, where again, the mobile device has an ability to do an even more targeted ad, and we believe in ROI-based advertising. So we think that when you sign up for a random ad, you don't target the people at all. That's not a very good use of your money. But if you can do a targeted ad to the person who is a likely buyer, look at YouTube. They invented this thing called the TrueView format, where the advertiser doesn't even pay until you actually watch the ad after a certain period of time. And that's another example of the kind of targeting that we can do. So lots of that coming. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. It's Ingrid from TechCrunch. Hi there. So you've been talking a lot about the lack of the Android for every person, and we are starting to see quite a proliferation of Android
yes,
in countries.
850,000. Let's go through the numbers.
Yeah.
850,000 per day, right, Andy? 300 million activated. right? What have you been doing? The numbers, I think those numbers have doubled in 6 months.
Yeah, you've had brilliant growth on Android.
Yeah. Doubling every 6 months, do the compounding.
Yes.
Eventually, it'll be like $1 trillion.
Yes.
We'll run out of people.
Exactly.
We need to produce more people.
Yeah.
Right.
2 phones per person. So I'm wondering about the fact that some of the growth that we've seen in Android has actually been forked Android growth. So not kind of keying in on any of the Google services that you guys have developed, not the market, not anything else. What's your opinion on that trend, and what are you doing to address it?
Well, first place, the kind of stuff you're talking about is completely allowed by open source. So it's important to understand right now that we understood that this stuff would happen. It is anticipated, and it's fine, right? We hope the people who have decided to not use the Android marketplace or some of the Google packages will see that they'll be more successful if they do so, but it's their choice. We don't prevent them from doing it. We don't require them. We don't contractually. We don't sue them. Another activity that we don't do, if you get my drift. So it's your choice, right? But we hope that that pressure from consumers, because these are businesses, right? They're smart business people. We hope that the pressure from consumers will get some of those platforms to see the benefit of joining this larger Android market ecosystem. The year 2012, if I can paraphrase the strategy, is building out the full Android ecosystem. Take Ice Cream Sandwich, which is brilliant, by the way. I mean, as an operating system, put it on every device, get all the platforms over to it, which takes a while. It's not a trivial amount of work. Get everything into Android market. And then if you just do the math, the thing is huge, right? It's a scale that you've not seen. There's nothing of that scale in the market today. So that's the opportunity.
Thank you.
More questions? Go ahead. In the way back. In the way back. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mayan from South Africa. For too long now, we've been hearing the mobile operator CEOs talk about the heavy investments that they need to make into infrastructure, and the over-the-top players come in and take the profit off the top. What do you see in the future for ecosystems that are not bogged down with these kind of legacy issues, and there's more profit to share, and it's more of an open relationship between over-the-top players and infrastructure owners?
I'm very sensitive to these arguments because I think they're true. I think the fact of the matter is it's very difficult to be a telecom operator right now. Let's just review why it's so hard. The first is that you have a tough regulatory environment. It's difficult or impossible for you, for competitive or regulatory reasons, to raise your data plan. You've also got the reality that you have to upgrade your equipment to 4G. And that's a significant capital cost at a time when capital is very difficult to obtain, as opposed to a few years ago where anyone, including Joe Schmo, could get it. And then the third is that you have customers, those sort of nasty customers, who are busy using enormous amounts of the bandwidth that's so scarce for you. And governments, in addition to regulating you to death, are also charging huge fees for new bandwidth. It's a very difficult box that regulators find themselves in. So I think the simplest answer is that, operators, that the operators and the regulators have got to sit down and come to some kind of a rational collaboration. Because the regulators need the operators to be successful, and the operators are forced by law to work with the regulators. And I think that's what's really likely going to happen. We, Google, are critically dependent upon this infrastructure building out. So the Android demo that we showed, right, uses bandwidth. We worked very hard between the Honeycomb release and the Ice Cream Sandwich release to improve our use of data bandwidth. And one of the benefits of ICS, if you haven't used it, is you can see the amount of bandwidth we're using, and they're much more bandwidth friendly. You yourself can control it, and also the operator can throttle it as appropriate. So the sum of all of that means that we're trying to be respectful of the very real problem that the operators have. Some more questions? Okay, let's go. Over there.
Hello, my name is Jihad. I work in Du in the Emirates. You mentioned that more than 97% of your revenues come from advertising.
It might be 98.
Sorry?
It might be 98%.
Okay, 98. I'm guessing 100% of those are made on mobile or telecom networks that you did not invest in. How do you see the business model going forward between OTT players and telecom or mobile operators?
Again, I'm not sure how to answer that question except to say that we're investing heavily in applications that we believe will drive the excitement about, in particular, wireless data. And wireless data is the only real source of growth for most of the operators that I've spoken with. So the things, the tools and technologies and all the things that we invest in, we think are helping people move to a 4G world, to smartphones and so forth. And the operators can recoup that in both revenue growth and then eventually earnings growth if they can get through this. I think I'm told we have time for one more question. Way at the back, it's apparently the last question.
Hello, I'm Mariana from Convergencia Latina. You said that there is going to be a more accurate search or result if people allow you to track information from the users. So is this going to end in two different or more than two different qualities of search results, depending on if you have information of the user or if the user don't allow you to track information?
Yeah, I don't like the word track. That's not what we're doing. But it's correct to say that if you choose to use Google anonymously, which we will always allow you to do, we'll do the absolute best we can in an anonymous way. We have many, many ways in which you can do that. There's also a mode in Chrome where you can browse incognito. So it's not only do you not tell us, but we can't discover who you are if you need that level of incognito, if you will. Most people will find that their results will get better if they're logged in and if they allow us, with their permission, to, for example, remember their search entry, because we can do a better job of understanding who they are. But we'll always allow for both. I want to thank everybody for spending an hour on this and on this incredibly important topic. Thank you so much.